Hey everyone. Yeah, as it says in the description, I tried to do this a couple of days ago after work during lunch and stuff with my Android phone, my Galaxy Luna, and unfortunately, I had some connecting issues. I don't know if it's because my LTE is getting ready to expire and I have to renew tonight or after midnight tonight, or the fact that it had just the areas I was in just didn't connect well, and sometimes I think it's also just people on their phones as well and on the internet or something, and all the signals are just coming in at once or something. I don't know. It might be the weather too, but I was always getting a very bad connection or reconnection vibe, and I just figured I even tried to record a video just to upload on YouTube, and that didn't even work because I ran out of space, I guess, so I couldn't do it. But I thought I'd come out here and finally, with the time I've gotten, give my thoughts and memories on Bobby the Brain Heenan. First of all, my thoughts and prayers go out to his family in this time of grievance. We all feel how you are feeling right now. We all respect and understand the situation you are dealing with right now because Bobby, to us as wrestling fans, was probably the most iconic color commentators and managers, and at times in-ring performers you could ever imagine. His career, as it's been stated, spanned 4 decades. The fact that he started out as a wrestler, managed by somebody I can't think of his name right now, and transitioned from that to being a manager, to being an occasional wrestler, and to do it in a way that no one else could. It's truly amazing. You know, a lot of people will say that he's most memorable for his time as a color commentator, opposite of Gorilla Monsoon, opposite sometimes of Vince McMahon, and or even Mean Gene Okerlund. But the, but despite all those other broadcast partners he always seemed to bounce off well with Gorilla Monsoon. From the time he showed up on Primetime Wrestling as a co-host in place of Jesse Ventura, to the last day of Primetime Wrestling, before it became Monday Night Raw, it was always a showcase. It was always something to enjoy. Even when they decided to go from the two-man format to the conference panel where you had Vince McMahon, you had Gorilla Monsoon, you had Reverend Slick, you had Hillbilly Jim, you had Mr. Perfect, you had Bobby the Brain Heenan. Still, Bobby was able to show how charismatic he could be and how, not just with Gorilla Monsoon, but everybody around him, how well he can bounce off of them and make them look good as well as they made him look good. A lot of people remember when Monday Night Raw's first episode happened, how they would always cut outside the Manhattan Center and Bobby Heenan was trying to get in. And when he finally joined the broadcast team there, and on occasions would broadcast with Gorilla Monsoon, from what I understand, even though I couldn't watch much Monday Night Raw at that time, it was like it was the right thing. It was basically Bobby was the right ingredient for that Raw commentary. But even when he was bouncing, even before that, when he was bouncing back and forth from being a manager and a commentator, and even an occasional wrestler, Bobby still made everybody he worked with shine like $1 billion. There's no doubt about that. Um, he had some iconic moments that we'll all remember. when it came to, especially when it came to the Heenan family. You know, everybody thinks that the Heenan family and the Weasel Suit match all originated in World Wrestling Federation. It didn't. It all originated in the American Wrestling Association, the AWA. Perhaps one of the first times it ever was seen on television was in the AWA, and it was during the time that he had a feud, a rivalry with Greg Gagne. And for Bobby Heenan to put Greg Gagne over the way he did with that Weasel match says something to Bobby Heenan, because here's the thing. A lot of people look at Greg Gagne and they say, here's a guy that was basically handed the world on a silver platter. Could have been handed the AWA World Championship on a silver platter, but instead opted to be the world's television champion or light heavyweight champion. And yet, here's a guy that Bobby Heenan, when he was told he was going to work with him and he was going to put him over, sold it like $1,000,000. Now, the difference, though, between Bobby's rivalry and going into that Weasel Suit match with Greg Gagne and his rivalry with the Warrior and the occasional Weasel Suit match he would have with him is, believe it or not, Bobby Heenan was allowed, I should say, to look good. He was allowed to put up some kind of a fight with Greg Gagne. Because at least, it seemed more realistic, even though they were competing in a gimmick match. You take a look at Warrior, and Bobby Heenan was booked to make Warrior look like $1,000,000, but also booked to look absolutely terrified at the fact that it could just take a few moments and he'd be in the freaking Weasel Suit before you knew it. So, out of respect, I have to say that the AWA at least gave Bobby the opportunity to have a fighting chance against someone like Greg Gagne when it came to a Weasel Suit match. They gave him that opportunity, but they also gave him the opportunity to create something that would journey over to World Wrestling Federation, and that's the Heenan family. And in the AWA, he had like a who's who there. Most notably, he had Nick Bockwinkel, who many say didn't really need a mouthpiece or a mouthpiece or a manager of any kind, because he was so good on his own. But yet, adding Bobby Heenan to the equation just made things more iconic, more precious, more memorable than they've ever been before for someone like Nick Bockwinkel. It just put him over even more so, because now you didn't just have a self-centered, obnoxious, I'm better than you heel champion in Nick Bockwinkel. Now you are associated with him with a manager of equal stature. But it wasn't just Nick Bockwinkel either. He had guys like the Blackjacks. I think he had a time the Crusher, just to name a few, that he had under his Heenan family stable in the AWA. But when it came to WWF, that's when the Heenan family really exploded. Just like Hulkamania started in the AWA and just really took off like a rocket ship and never looked back in the when it came to WWF. Same thing with the Heenan family. It started off in its humble roots of the AWA, got noticed, and when it was given a chance here in the WWF, it took off and never looked back. It took off and never looked back due to the fact that Bobby had like a who's who, in his stable. Believe it or not, he had people if you got into wrestling around the mid to late 80s, you would think never would be associated with Bobby Heenan, yet they were. He had guys like, one of the most notable guys he had was Paul Orndorff. Not once, but twice. He had Paul Orndorff, Mr. Wonderful, in his stable. Believe it or not, he had Ken Patera, despite how you may feel about him. Despite the fact you may have seen him when he was a fan favorite in WWF, if you started in the mid to late 80s, Ken Patera was part of his stable. I think at one time he even had maybe Adrian Adonis under his wing. But that wasn't it. That wasn't just the end. He had guys like Big John Studd, King Kong Bundy, who first came in with Jimmy Hart. He had the Islander, which was amazing, who came in as fan favorites and go against teams that Bobby would have him go against, and in the end they sided with him. You had the Brainbusters, Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, two-fourths of the original Four Horsemen, now in WWF, part of the Heenan family. I mean, you had a lot of people. I think you even had the Genius at one time under Bobby's tutelage, under his management. Brooklyn Brawler. You had Terry Taylor as the Red Rooster under his tutelage. And probably the most iconic that he had was Andre the Giant. Because he's a figure. He's a figure of sports entertainment and entertainment in general. The two WrestleManias ago fought Big John Studd in a body slam contest. Big John Studd, who was part of the Heenan family. And now two WrestleManias later, he's part of the Heenan family. He's the most important acquisition Bobby Heenan ever got. And here he was. And the way it played out storyline wise, people have talked about to this day. The fact it all started with a trophy presentation and Hulk Hogan getting this massive trophy and Andre getting this smaller one. Basically, from a figurative, if not literal standpoint, saying, yeah, you may be undefeated. You may be an undefeated giant for the past 15 years. Yeah, you may be the eighth wonder of the world, but you're nothing compared to Hulk Hogan. You are insignificant. And just to play off that, hold on for a second. But like I said, just to play off that, sorry about that, I was checking something there, but just to play off that situation, that moment, and then to have that other iconic moment where where you have Hulk Hogan being interviewed on Piper's Pit, and all of a sudden here comes Bobby Heenan, and out alongside him is Andre the Giant. Can I say anything more? Can I say anything more besides the moment where the crucifix gets ripped off? Can I say anything more? Excuse me there. I can't. And the fact that he had Andre in his stable for 3 years is saying something. I mean, yeah, you might say, well, he wasn't initially in his stable for 3 years. He worked with Ted DiBiase. He was still part of the Heenan family. From a story perspective, he was on loan to Ted DiBiase from Bobby Heenan. The point is, for Bobby Heenan to be told he's going to manage the eighth wonder of the world is saying something of how valuable, how important Vince McMahon valued Bobby Heenan as a heel manager in that company. That says a lot when you get told you're going to manage the eighth wonder of the world. And the fact that he was able to manage him alongside Ted DiBiase to the WWF Championship is saying something. The fact that when he got the Brainbusters under his tutelage, he was able to manage them to the WWF Tag Team titles. The fact that when he got, again, I talk about a who's who, Ravishing Rick Rude, who was the WCCW World Champion before coming to WWF. I think the WCCW or DCWA Champion. Or sorry, DCWA. WCWA Champion before coming to WWF. The fact that, and also was an NWA World Tag Team Champion, the fact that Bobby Heenan was able to get him and guide him to the Intercontinental Championship. And then later on, one of his own, the genius, bringing in and managing Kurt Hennig and associating him with Kurt Hennig, just very similar to Nick Bockwinkel in a sense, and guiding him to the Intercontinental Championship not once but twice. It shows you how important the WWF, in a sense, valued the Heenan family. I mean, heck, he even guided Haku and Andre to the tag team titles as the Colossal Connection. But then, 1991 rolls around, and just when you think the Heenan family is starting to disperse, they're starting to die out. I mean, even one of the last remnants, the Barbarian, who, if you look on YouTube, was purchased, whose contract was purchased by Bobby Heenan, or sold to Bobby Heenan by Mr. Fuji, because Mr. Fuji now had the Orient Express and he had to sell off the Powers of Pain individually as singles competitors. With the Warlord going with Slick and the Barbarian going with Bobby Heenan. That just upped. I'm sorry to say this in due respect to the Warlord. That just upped the Barbarian stock just a bit to be with Bobby Heenan. But if you think that's not enough, how about the fact that in 1991, he gets told that Ric Flair is coming in, and he and Rick apparently have a real life friendship. And he mentions this to Vince McMahon, and Vince McMahon says, well, Rick's bringing in the NWA Championship with him. I'm going to have him give you the belt. You're going to showcase it on television, and you're going to declare Ric Flair the real world's champion. And you're going to, in a sense, have an semblance of the Heenan family still going, because now you had the Nature Boy as part of it. And if that's not enough, even when you think Ric Flair is the last gasping hope for the Heenan family, and he was, because he went on to be a two-time champion in WWF, and probably gave Bobby the most iconic Royal Rumble commentary moment any color commentator has had for the Royal Rumble up to that point. And the fact that he put the Heenan family, in a sense, what remained of it, back on the map with that Royal Rumble win and became champion. And then later on became a second-time champion. The fact that after all that, after Ric Flair ends up leaving, you still have the Heenan. You think the Heenan family is no more. Mr. Perfect's gone babyface. Barbarian has left the company. What's next? And then you find out Lex Luger's coming in. Lex Luger's coming in because the World Bodybuilding Federation folded. And you knew because of that little on-camera discussion, on-camera camaraderie that they had at WrestleMania 8, you knew he might be associated with Bobby Heenan, and guess what? That's exactly what he was. He was the last remaining remnants for the Heenan family. The last remaining remnants. And unfortunately, that all came to an end on July 4th of that year, when the WWF decided to repackage Lex Luger as the All-American. But even after that, Bobby Heenan would still do his job, would still try to make people look golden. He would still get in his sarcastic remarks, his jabs and all that, whether it was with Gorilla Monsoon next to him or Vince McMahon. He did what he had to do, and he made it look golden. And here's one thing some people may not know. It's one thing some people may not know. Bobby Heenan has been responsible for bringing in not one, not two, but three iconic non-WWF guys to the WWF. Three guys that made their names elsewhere were now part of WWF after being introduced by Bobby Heenan. Ric Flair, Lex Luger, and in this one may surprise people, Jerry the King Lawler. That's right. Bobby Heenan brought in Jerry the King Lawler on Primetime Wrestling. And what's funny about this is when he brought on Jerry Lawler, in a sense, temporarily, Jerry Lawler, for a brief time, from that moment, and I don't know how long, but I'm pretty sure it was a brief temporal time, was also a member of the Heenan family when that happened. I know that sounds crazy, but Jerry the King Lawler, part of the Heenan family, just maybe for a brief period, that's saying something. That's saying how even in its final remnants, its final days as a stable, how much the WWF valued Bobby Heenan and his Heenan family. I mean, the fact that he even gave him Harley Race in the mid to late 80s and early 90s as part of it is saying something. But like I said, even when that was all said and done, he still kept his wit about him. I mean, heck, he even brought in Jim Cornette, who helped get Jim Cornette. He helped introduce and get Jim Cornette over in the WWF when they were doing the partnership or when they were being associated and doing a partnership with Smoky Mountain Wrestling. It really says something. I'll tell you this, it really says something about a company. Whether you like them or not nowadays, whether you like what they're doing or not nowadays, it really says something about a company when they pretty much, even in the last dying days of a great stable like the Heenan family, shows you how much they value Bobby Heenan's contribution as the leader of that family by having him associated with some of these other big names outside the company that they were bringing in. But like I said, even on commentary, he was great. They even did an angle with him and Gorilla Monsoon, that led to his departure from WWF because of reasons, like I think personal dispute reasons or something like that. But but on the Raw that he was tossed out, but on the additional Monday Night Raw where he was tossed out, people would think at first, oh, that's just a storyline. He'll be back. No, that was literally his last official night in the company because what happened the following month? Here you have the following month, WCW Clash of the Champions. You have Mean Gene standing in the aisle talking. All of a sudden, he gets news, something he can't believe what he's hearing. He's almost in shock, like he's hearing something he doesn't want to hear, but he's hearing it over his head, his earpiece. It's like, oh no, not again. And out comes, and when he says the name, out he comes, Bobby the Brain Heenan. And even a month later, now in WCW, Bobby was still able to keep his wit. And the fact that he was able to keep that charm about him during the early to mid 90s in WCW, from doing color commentary at the pay-per-views, at the Clash of Champions, on the Saturday nights, on the worldwide. Just says a lot about him. Just says a tremendous lot about Bobby Heenan. And when they brought Nitro in, the fact that he was able to bounce off well with Steve McMichael and Eric Bischoff for a time really shows you that despite the fact that you could tell later on in his run with the company that he wasn't really having as much fun as he used to, that it now became a burden for him to be there. But he had to make money somehow. He had to make a living, even though you could tell it was a bit of a burden. You could tell that you could tell that during those early days of Nitro, he did his very best to remain charismatic and witty and still be the Weasel. I mean, heck, fans still chanted Weasel at him when he was against things like the NWO. That just shows you the mystique that Bobby Heenan had. And the fact that even, like I said, in his latter years with WCW, as much as a burden as it felt for him to be there, and as much as maybe he didn't want to be there, he made the best of everything. He made the best of an opportunity. He made the best of what he was given, no matter what. I mean, he even switched sides to the NWO during that test run with the NWO Monday Nitro deal, and then the following week tried to cover it up in classic Bobby Heenan style by saying, "Oh no, I was undercover for you guys. I went deep undercover for you guys to find out what they were doing," just to get himself back on the good side of good graces of WCW. Just, I mean, there was nothing. Whether it was a burden, whether you could tell he wasn't having as much fun or putting much effort as he want to or as he used to. There was nothing Bobby Heenan couldn't have done that didn't feel like it was important, because it was. I mean, even when they tried to get more attitude like and more ECW like, Bobby Heenan tried his best to, stay himself, try to add that wit in, try to add that charisma he used to have, even though it wasn't as good as it used to be, because you can tell, like I said, he wasn't as happy as he was when he first showed up in WCW, and now, like I said, it was becoming like a burden. He still tried, even with moments with Tank Abbott. He when he would see Tank Abbott with a weapon or doing something destructive to somebody, he tried to give it that old Bobby Heenan charm. Like, I can remember the May 3rd, 2000 edition. I think it was May 3rd of Thunder, and they did that battle royal at the end, and Tank's coming out with a lead pipe. I remember the line Bobby Heenan says, and I recorded this Thunder. Unfortunately, I don't have it anymore because the tape's pretty much thrown away. It's been wasted, destroyed, if you will. But I remember, but I can watch it online. I'm pretty sure the WWE Network's going to have it up soon. But I can remember when Tank Abbott came down, one of the words coming out of one of the words that came out of Bobby Heenan's mouth was, "Oh, Tank's got an iron pipe in his hands. That's nice." And that in a sense that, even though, like I said, you could tell it wasn't as witty, it wouldn't had that usual charm it used to. It was still classic Bobby Heenan. In fact, one of his other most iconic moments with that company came at the expense of Brian Pillman. When they were starting the whole loose cannon deal, everybody remembers the moment. And if not, you got to go watch the Clash, unless they edited the Clash of that year, unless they edited it out. Well, but where Brian is doing the loose cannon gimmick, no one's really sure what's really going on because they want to keep it so secretive. And he's going right over and messing with Bobby Heenan. Bobby Heenan gets up and says, "What the fuck are you doing?" On air, on TBS, which he later apologized about, but still, it didn't matter if it was spontaneous, if it was choreographed, or if it was ad-libbed. It didn't matter what it was. Everything Bobby Heenan touched, whether it was a burden for him later on doing his run with WCW or not, everything he did felt important. Everything felt special. And what you were watching, despite perhaps the fact that it wouldn't be a good show, and the fact that you felt it would be so boring, it's like repetitive, Bobby Heenan would try to make it feel special. He'd make it feel special to the point that you'd want to stay watching. You want to stay to watch just to hear what he has to say, hear how he would commentate on something. Like today, if he was still alive today, can you imagine the wits, the ad libs, the sarcasm, everything he would throw out at some of the babyface competitors that are just out there on Raw and SmackDown? Could you imagine how he would react to guys like an AJ, a Cena, a Roman, a Shinsuke, you name it? I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Can you imagine? I mean, if you think Corey Graves is good at what he does, and he is, Bobby Heenan would basically put Corey Graves to shame, and you know that. I mean, even even when he was diagnosed with the throat cancer, he still tried to be his witty, charming self. WrestleMania 20, the backstage segment with him, Gene, Moolah, and May, great example. Him and his Hall of Fame speech. Him and his Hall of Fame speech each that year, classic. Even when, and even as he was getting worse, he was getting treatments, radiation, surgeries. He even tried to make an effort to make some of the guys in TNA, GFW, Impact, whatever you want to call them, he tried his best to make them look good. I mean, he even dedicated a time to, I think, for one night managing the Naturals tag team. He even spent time, he even took time out of his schedule to film a segment where Bobby Roode was looking for a manager to guide his career, or looking for uh, a manager or an associate, an advocate, if you will, whatever, to manage his career. And Bobby Heenan, despite what he was going through at that time, did what he, took time out of his schedule to make an appearance in that. Even in 2007, he made one last appearance during Mr. McMahon Appreciation Night. It was still the same charming Bobby Heenan, witty Bobby Heenan that we remember. A lot of people question why the WWF didn't bring him back. Even before then. True, he had his reasonings, maybe, but I think they should have at least tried to reach out to him. I know the WWE has the best medical care anybody can offer, whether they want to admit it or not. And I know the WWE would have done what they could if they would have brought Bobby Heenan in and understood the situation. But why they didn't do that, I don't know. I can only assume that it was out of respect. Maybe because we all know that when we get worried about something, and we know that no matter how many treatments we get, that we're either going to get better or we're going to get worse. And I'm sure maybe it's just my opinion. It's just my opinion. But I'm sure when Bobby Heenan's family heard that despite all the radiations, the operations and stuff that he was getting, that things were just going to get worse, and that they need to prepare for the worst eventually, then maybe out of respect, the Heenan family declined any offer to show up. Maybe after 2007, they said, "That's it, no more," because we don't know what condition he'll be in the next month, the next year. So maybe him not showing up in WWE again, at least maybe for one or two more appearances. It was out of respect. And if it was out of respect, I can understand that. I can appreciate that. But all I can say is this. In closing, I'll say this. As someone that grew up on wrestling in the late 80s, the mid to late 80s, and throughout the 90s, Bobby Heenan is a is an iconic figure that will never be forgotten. I mean, I can even remember when he made a one night return to managing, but he dubbed it as coaching in WCW. And I think it was Arn Anderson and Ric Flair against Mongo and Kevin Green. And I remember he just decided to, in classic Bobby Heenan style, swerve us and make us think it was not managing, but yet it was, but he just swerved it into being known as coaching. That's classic Bobby Heenan. And to know that that figure is no longer with us, it's saddened. It's a very it's a very it's it's it's, it's, it's very saddened moment because I grew up on him. I grew up being one of those fans that just loved it when he got his comeuppance. I mean that moment at Survivor Series '89 when it's just him and Warrior in the ring, and he's pointing to Anderson to come back, and then he turns around and all of a sudden he's got this look on his face. He sees Warrior in the ring. He turns around. He's like this. He's like he can't believe what he's seen. He's like he can't believe he's in the ring alone with the Warrior. Classic Bobby Heenan. Classic. All I could say is Bobby Heenan, you will be missed by me and a lot of wrestling personalities that knew you in the business, a lot of the fans that got the pleasure to meet you, and a lot of the fans that didn't get the pleasure to meet you but watch you and grew up with you on television, and even was lucky to see you in person when they would attend a live event. You'll never be forgotten. There'll be there will be there'll never again be another Bobby Heenan. There'll be never again be another Brain, another Weasel. For everything you've done, thank you. Thank you. Thank you on behalf of all of us that grew up watching you. And if WWE was to create another award to present at the Hall of Fame, to go alongside the Warrior Award, as well as that Legends thing they're doing as well, if there's another award they should create, it's for managers. And it doesn't matter, and it's not just managers in professional wrestling, but managers in all sports and entertainment. And I think this should be dubbed the Bobby Heenan Award. The Bobby the Brain Heenan Award, or the Brain Award. As a matter of fact, just the Bobby Heenan Award. An award, an award given to those that exemplify what a true leader and manager in all sports and entertainment is truly about. Outside of the sport or outside of their entertainment zone and beyond. So WWE, if you're listening, I think that's what you should do. For everything this man did for your company, for the professional wrestling and sports entertainment business, I think without a shadow of a doubt, if you need to create another award to present at the WWE Hall of Fame alongside the Warrior Award, then I think of none other person that deserves to have a name or award named after him than Bobby Heenan. Bobby Heenan should have an award named after him. It should be the Bobby the Brain Heenan Award or the Bobby Heenan Award, and it should be presented to those that exemplify what a true leader and manager is in all sports and entertainment. Doesn't matter if it's doesn't matter if it's professional sports, arts, Broadway entertainment, doesn't matter. I think that's what WWE needs to do, and they need to do it right now. They need to get on it right now. They need to get on getting this award made, and they need to get on deciding who the first recipient of that award should be. So that's all I can really say in this live remembrance to Bobby the Brain Heenan. Bobby, again, thank you for all you've done. God rest your soul. You're up there once again with Gorilla Monsoon. And if any of us believe in life starting over or believe in an afterlife, then you know that Bobby Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon are back at it again, calling the action and being the usual charming selves to each other for us. So, Bobby, Thank you for all the memories. You'll truly be missed. You're one of a kind. And again, my condolences and prayers go out to his family. We love you guys, and our hearts are with you. Thank you all, and thank you, Bobby the Brain Heenan, for all the great memories. God bless. Take care.